Hello, welcome back. So, I actually had my whole internet crash, so that'll probably happen again. But otherwise, I thought we could keep going. So, let me try and find the right one. I don't think that's the right one for us to be on. Is it this one? No. Bear with me as I find the right window where we were just hanging out. We can go hang out together. In the meantime, I can try and close some of this. If possible, often not possible, because I have like a million tabs open everywhere. But some of them are one-offs. That's a nice thing. Not that one. Um, oh, maybe it's this one. Here we go. Okay. So we're picking up reading this article. It's called Preliminary Materials for a Theory of the Young Hegelian E-Girl. And it's on this outlet called the Charnel House. I don't really know anything about them. From Bauhaus to Beinhaus. Bauhaus is like an art movement from Deutschland. And we got through a lot of it. We're going to try and get through, I guess we can try and get through the rest of it. Okay. Because we read the preparatory remarks. So then this person is basically saying, why is Anna using Hegel? Like, this person's basically saying you can just do this with Marx or something like this. So yeah, these are Marxist points, not okay. And then Anna talked about this thing called social mediation. Not clear what that means. And not new piety for the absolute, right? So Anna, I think Anna did say they were trying to do a vibe shift or something. So again, it's like a poetic thing of language, but that's also suspicious because it's like, what are you talking about? You could be emboldening, again, back to the morale as part of war, right? You could be emboldening people to be hateful and to harm other people, right? And to have this eliminationist Hobbesian trap mentality. That could be a problem, even if you say you're trying not to do that, right? I guess that's a classic. It's a classic position where you want to say like, no, the problem is people are fighting, right? So now we're fighting between the people who are fighting and the people who think that we should stop fighting, right? So it's like, anyway, there's an issue there. Like just saying you want peace, it's like not enough. Like you can bomb people in the name of saving lives, right? So it's like yeah, there's a lot to it, put it that way. Okay. Contains itself the term negation of that which opposes the cult of immediacy. I don't know exactly what is supposed to be meant by this cult of immediacy. It's funny they would maybe talk to me about it because I was just talking about not really liking alienation, but okay, well, let's just start here. And I don't know what she thinks it would take to achieve a speculative universalism. This is the article. Maybe that it contains within itself the determinate negation of that which it opposes, the cult of immediacy as a result. The most dialectical formulation she sets forth is about being at once timely and untimely, and that's probably the best bit. That's what, yeah, we were reading about that. But we'll keep going now. Otherwise, she would need to flesh these arguments out in a longer article because, as things stand, it just sounds like she inserted Hegelian buzzwords in order to rev up her readership. I get that it's a mini manifesto and that it's supposed to be stirring, but still, like, what's wrong with that? Like, I don't know, like, to be invoking Hegel is already to be doing something. You don't necessarily have to say more at a certain point. And also, like, what's wrong with, yeah, like, I guess that people call it clout chasing, but like, I think people should have more clout. I think a lot of people should have clout. I want clout or whatever, not like forever or whatever, but like, you know, like I want what I say to matter. And like, but like, that's the only way not necessarily the only way, but like a great way for that to happen is for it to also matter what other people are saying. Anyway, which reminds me a lot of what I've been relating to is the dialectic of recognition. But anyway, the article continues. The prepared remarks Anna read at the symposium were of a much lower quality. Virtually everything she said there came in a sort of mock Freudian register in what Freud himself would have probably called Laienanalyse, if not out-and-out psychobabble. So again, this person is just like using this term, and it's like, what does this even mean? Like this happened before with something else. Lay analysis. Oh, lay analysis. Okay, so yeah, you're not qualified. Uh-oh. If not out-and-out psychobabble. She tries to psychoanalyze the city of New York, identifying the different layers of its unconscious, the metropolitan ego, superego, and id. In her view, the New York literary scene suffers from an obscure repetition compulsion. I'll be the first to admit that there's plenty that's pathological about New York City, but I don't think it is specific to the city. Rather, I did notice that when they were like, this city, it sounded like something from like a Batman movie where it's like the setting is the city. It's like, what are you talking about? Like, we have to address the whole planet, basically. Anyway, this person continues, what's going on is not specific to the city of New York. Rather, it's symptomatic of culture under capitalism as a whole. Okay, again, I don't understand what these people think they're saying when they're telling me. They keep going on about it. This is capitalism. It's like, what do you mean by that? Like, I fundamentally don't think the word capitalism communicates much to me. Like, I much prefer to speak in terms of like social networks, like military, intelligence, and yeah, I mean, the economy comes into it. But I think when we think capitalism, you think so much of economic domination. But so much of what I consider, for example, to be the primary contradiction has to do with like there being apparently anyway, multiple concerns in the sense of like there's the United States or NATO plus, and there's China or whatever. Like there's different groups that might nuke each other, and that's real bad. And like part of the reason why it's so hard to change anything is that these powers, want to keep people rigidly loyal to them in order to bolster their candidacy or whatever their situation within this constantly tenuous situation where literally the fate of the world is on the line, right? Anyway, and so yeah, and then in terms of ownership, I basically interpret the whole bourgeois thing or whatever. Basically, I would say corresponds to Newtonianism, as Zweibelson says it, and as Baudrillard would say, like the reality didn't exist at a certain point, and then we started to hallucinate about reality, and that's basically, I think, the Newtonian idea. We come into this idea like, oh, like we're going to understand things, and then like we've had empires which have been doing this for a long time. So it's not to say that nobody alive, right, even started this, but in terms of like using force and the methods of raising people to then instill, these ways of thinking, and anyway, relating. Made a big difference. But yeah, so this is culture under capitalism as a whole. But yeah, but basically, yes, it's about more than New York City, and that I completely understand. I completely agree. And usually, when people say capitalism, they just mean like the way things are, like because you can say like, well, for example, what I would say is that I don't believe in the public-private distinction. So like, I don't believe in private property. Like, I don't believe it. I don't believe ownership is possible, right? I don't think people own things. So we can talk about it in terms of like, it's seeming like people own things and people treating it like people own things, but I don't think it's like a concession, I think, to try and say that people actually own things. So it's not necessarily about the ownership of the means of production or whatever, but it's about like a social standoff. And I also think it's like the crucial thing with capitalism and the classes is that I think there's a constant fallacy going on with I'm not going to be able to get through this. The unitary actor idea, right? Like the idea that even the people who run a company or run a country, like that they are united. Like in reality, they're at war with each other. Like it's a bad situation where it's like it's been warlordism. That's my interpretation. Like actually, there's the rumor of civilization is way overrated, and so like to say it's a class thing, I think that the basically the behavior of a social group often arises also from the contradictions within it. So it's always misleading to refer to like something as a static concept, which is a lot of what these people like Anna and Nikki were all saying in their speeches and in their posts. But I guess I better keep going. So anyway, toward the end of the first paragraph, the writer continues, though, Anna gets lost in her own prolix prose. Okay, now we get to read Anna again. That's awesome. By what means may we combat this spiral down an abyss of nihilistic degeneracy in accordance with the cult of sensuous immediacy mandated by the currently reigning neoliberal ideology by the means of concrete philosophizing? Concrete philosophizing means applying insight to the alchemical transformation of everyday life. Philosophy must be raised above the insularity of an academic exercise. We must make use of abstraction by suspending its methodological isolation. We must discover the intricate dialectical connections that the constitution of speculative thought as an interpersonal practice bears objectively. So, I mean, all Anna is basically saying here is like we need to apply academic philosophy. Like there's so much of stuff that like people are writing about, and there's so many people writing about revolution, right? In terms of like what will it do, what will it take, and then like in terms of what actually happens, you know, it's very muted. So that's sort of basically it. So there's like a lot of there's a lot of pent up energy, especially as I would say the situation becomes desperate. Okay, I got to keep going. But like as the situation becomes desperate, it becomes a like throw the kitchen sink at it approach, where it's like everything is becoming operationalized. So within the war frame, everything's becoming weaponized. But in terms of an emergency response frame, which I personally think is better, it's like everything is becoming part of the emergency response. Everything is being operationalized and used for what it can help in terms of bringing the emergency response operation to bear. I just realized there's something I wanted to mention a long time ago, but a crossover between Zweibelson and like trying to get through to him on you know, the importance of going post-military or like post-war, basically, or just like non-war, you know, like overriding war-peace distinction, and therefore basically just decentering the war term, basically. But then also playing in with Hegel's dialectic of recognition. It's like a thing where it's like it's not you versus me, it's me versus the problem. But then it's like, well, what's the problem? Right. And so that is then in terms of the common enemy, right? There's a common enemy, but there's also just a common task. But so how is the common task articulated? That is really the problem, especially when you reach a point where you really need very wide agreement. So it's really like it needs to be good enough for everyone. But, you know, so it's a balance between being articulated enough that it's actually something versus like not being too particularist in the sense of like not being too provincial or like not being too caught up in the specific scene or whatever that it's emerging out of, so that it's not relatable, so that it can't help other people, so that it might be talking about getting away from a hard stance on concepts but still remains within one, which would obviously apply to all of us anyway, like me as well. So anyway, the author continues, I wish I could say it got better from there. After this baffling interlude, Anna tries to confront some of the accusations of fascism leveled against the Hegelian E-Girls. The fascies are a symbol of power, she says, following it up with a psychoanalytic non sequitur. In a sense, they are a desexualized phallus. Incidentally, I don't think that it's accurate to charge them with having fascist sympathies. This is not to say that there's no reactionary subtext here, simply that it's a flavor other than fascism. But I'll save that for the last section, which spells out the politics undergirding the Hegelian E-Girl project. Nikki's speech is by contrast refreshingly direct, even if it is longer. She starts out by discussing the immense mimetic power of the Hegelian E-Girls. Hegel has, without doubt, been extremely memified over the past few years. Whether this is a good thing or a bad thing, I'll leave to the reader to decide. Personally, I enjoy a good Hegel meme as much as the next guy. At any rate, though, a lot of time is spent in Nikki's speech deploring the way that Hegel's philosophy has been confined to the ivory tower. Fair enough. She is right to take aim at the vulgar empiricism in which the Anglo tradition has long wallowed, although I do wonder what she would make of the Pittsburgh school of Hegelianism with Brandom and Sellers. Regardless, there's one quibble I had with her speech, though it may seem pedantic. She distinguishes between a false dualism, which is static, and a true dualism, which is dynamic. Hegel's philosophy is resolutely monistic. There are no dualisms, just manifold oppositions which dissolve before their own finitude. The point she's trying to make, namely that political alternatives offered by both major American parties constitutes a false opposition, is true enough, however. Yet again, though, everyone ought to know that. Yes, I do think they've read Hegel. On top of that, they've also read some commentaries, as I'm sure we all have. There are too many commentaries out there, frankly, and it's hard to keep track of the immense body of Hegel scholarship in the academy. I can't be bothered to read all the crap churned out by the academic presses on the topic, but it's perfectly natural to lean on secondary literature in approaching a philosopher as daunting as Hegel. So it's just a question of which interpretations they've drawn upon in order to articulate their own position. As far as I can tell, just going by these speeches and trawling through their Twitter account, Nikki and Anna approach Hegel via Lacan, very much a la Zizek. They don't have this sweaty charm or funny accent, of course, but you can tell from their repeated reference to jouissance that Zizek was formative for them. Here's another meme. Oh, Zizek, liberal academics. Habermas? What? It's horrible. Deconstructionists who think they've gone beyond Hegel. Beyond Hegel. Toulouse, neoliberals, deconstructionists, accelerationists, Slavoj Žižek, Mr. Capitals, Wiles, right? Okay. You just gotta give me that look. When you give me that look, then the pain's coming off. Okay. Okay, we got there. Whatever else one might say about Zizek, he's a major public intellectual who has sold tons of books and has been very influential. Jameson and Eagleton and countless others were blurbed on all his old verso titles. I disagree with many of his specific positions and am opposed to Lacanian readings of Hegel in general. Most French Hegelianism after the war, even Marxist variants, excepting those of Henri Lefebvre and Guy Debord, were vectored through Alexandre, this is where I don't even try, Alexander Kojevi's lectures about Hegel. Kojeve, or something, was deeply influenced by Heidegger and focused too much on the dialectic of, oh, here we go, more judgment. Focused too much on the dialectic. How could you focus on the dialectic of recognition so much? Okay, this is funny. That's what I was just saying, though. Focused too much on the dialectic of recognition in the self-consciousness chapter of the phenomenology, which is quickly overcome in the transition to reason. Lacan was deeply impacted by Kojeve in his essay on the mirror stage and his reception of Hegel in general, assimilating it to his structuralist Freudianism. Zizek inherited a lot of these faults from Kojeve by way of Lacan. Robert Pippin's review of Less Than Nothing tackles some of these problems. Still, Zizek has occasionally made some serious arguments that are worth grappling with. I'm not sure if this is the case with the Hegelian E-Girls. It's hard to tell whether there's a there there. That's a funny sentence. Whether there's a there there. There's a there there. Is there a there there? There's a there there. Is there a there there? Anyway, Nikki was recently rereading The Sublime Object of Ideology, Zizek's first book, and that has come through in her pronouncements. Her Twitter handle, furthermore, is Return to Hegel. That echoes what Zizek proposed years ago in his last serious treatise, Less Than Nothing, where he argued that we need to go back to Hegel rather than back to Marx. Just a week or so ago, she wrote that she supported Zizek's thesis that communists need to return from Marx back to Hegel to understand Marx. It should be mentioned that Zizek is not the first to make this claim. People often say you need to read Hegel to understand Marx. Lenin famously remarked that you shouldn't try to comprehend Capital unless you've read and understood all of the science of logic. He was probably right. There, at the very least, it enriches your understanding and helps you appreciate the conceptual moves Marx was making and how his overall argument unfolds. Marx never got around to writing his promised article on dialectics, where he was going to lay bare the methodology used in Capital and other works. So reading Hegel can be really valuable in that respect. But even more than reading Hegel in order to understand Marx, I think you need to read Marx in order to understand Hegel. Let me explain what I mean. Marx believed that Hegel's system. Okay, this is now going like this is my article about the theory of the young of Hegel, but now it's just like grants. I mean, that's what everybody should do, right? It's like this now. It's just like this is what I think about Hegel. All right, let's go. Let me explain what I mean. Marx believed that Hegel's system marked the culmination of more than 2 millennia of philosophical development. Hegel had effectively brought all of philosophy to a close. Not long after his death, however, bourgeois society, the truth of which Hegel had grasped in thought, was thrown into crisis by industrial capitalism. All the categories he'd spun out in his writings were seemingly inverted, and his radical followers, the left Hegelians, tried to update his philosophy in order to come up with terms in order to come to terms with the new reality. In so doing, however, Marx and Engels felt that the young Hegelians had each in turn fallen short of Hegel. They didn't think they were smarter than Hegel, they just didn't think Hegel lived long enough to see industrialization transform society. For them, the existence of an immiserated industrial proletariat gave body to the negativity of capitalist conditions as the concrete universal class within bourgeois society. As philosophy finds its material weapon in the proletariat, so the proletariat finds its spiritual weapon in philosophy, Marx wrote in the introduction to his critique of Hegel's philosophy. Okay. Anna is a bit hard to pin down. She is clearly inspired by Zizek, but has some criticisms. For example, she is right that Zizek's Hegel is too Schellingian, but anyone who read his stuff from the 90s, tarrying with the negative, indivisible remainder, would know this is the case. He tries to read Schelling's philosophy of the Middle Period after Hegel ended their friendship with the infamous night in which all cows are black remark. I mean, this is the kind of thing where, you know, like, you got my curiosity, right? You can't just, like, say shit like that. Oh, man. And everything's fucking paywalled. It's like, what is this thing about Hegel? It's like, give me $50 and I'll tell you. It's like, Jesus Christ. Okay. Conception of absolute knowledge in terms of immediate intuition or feeling. Night in which all cows are black. So maybe that's too much like monism. It's like if everything's just Brahmaning all the time, it's like it's just too indifferentiated. Anyway, who knows? He tries to read Schelling's philosophy of the Middle Period after Hegel ended their friendship with the infamous night in which all cows are black remark. I mean, those are fighting words. I mean, you can't just... Anyway, into the Lacanian logic of the lack or the void of being plaguing the split subject, especially the 1809 lectures on the origin of evil and freedom and the Weltalter books. By contrast, and in keeping with her own Lacanianism, she, Anna, is convinced that Lacan remained closer to Hegel with his logicism instead of the mythopoiesis of Schelling. I don't know Lacan well enough to say. Besides Zizek, she has expressed admiration for the late Gillian Rose, author of the classic Hegel Contra Sociology. Her old lectures on the Frankfurt School also just came out. Okay, they just came out. It's like the new Taylor Swift album. We got the new frickin', what is it? Lectures on the old lectures on the Frankfurt School. Like, boom. Boom goes the dynamite. Okay. Anyway. Melancholy Science, Dialectic of Nihilism, Mourning Becomes the Law. That sounds freaking hilarious. And by which I mean awesome. Anyway, her old lectures, as well as the Japanese theorist Kojin Karatani and Julia Kristeva. Yeah, see, we got it. That's the thing. It's like, okay, yeah, you want to do philosophy. It's like, guess what? There's 1,000,000 freaking philosophers, and like everybody can be freaking amazing, right? Like Hegel's really famous, but that's not to say Hegel's necessarily better than anybody else. Like, it's not like some, like, what do we say? Meritocracy, where it's like if there was some great person who was better than Hegel, they would certainly be famous. That's not necessarily true. Plus, how would you even know? It's like not the kind of thing you judge like that. Anyway, so Anna has expressed admiration and for these people. With Anna, I feel like she sometimes just reaches into the grab bag of theory, a byproduct of 40 years of theoretical overproduction. Okay, so yeah, I mean, this is getting into something that I talk about, which is like, yeah, we have too many concepts. So now there's like a lot of conceptual material to deploy. But I think that's also fine. It's like what everybody should be doing is a bricolage of all the materials and then like cobble it together. And where I think it's cool is like everybody has a different thing that they cobble together, but there's some overlap. So if you can find some overlap to where somebody overlaps with everybody, then that's how you sort of stitch a social fabric together, if that makes sense. Like you can find common points with other people, like in these like I don't know if it's like indirect ways, but you don't share for example, you don't have everything. I mean, depending on the categories you create, it could be that you don't share, you're not alike. You're certainly not necessarily have all the same categories as everybody else. And maybe there's some categories you have that nobody else has, or vice versa, or something like that. So then, but what you do have is that you have the same you have some overlap with somebody else. And then that person also has attributes you don't have, and those overlap with still other people. So anyway, building out like that seems like a good idea to me. Anyway, and so yeah, I don't really understand this. I guess it's just like it's not what it doesn't seem like it has a very tied in sense of purpose. Reading this charitably, like, but if you're just saying like it's a problem to like refer to things and like it doesn't meet your standard of like deserving to refer to things, like I don't know about all that. This person continues. Moreover, Anna has said that she now disagrees with Zizek's atheism and has become a follower of Eastern Orthodoxy. Anna? Eastern Orthodoxy? She calls herself an Orthodox Christian social communist? Nikki is Catholic? I didn't know about all this. For an Hegelian, this strikes me as very odd. Hegel always stressed the importance of Luther and the Reformation and the development of inwardness and modern subjectivity, and was openly contemptuous of Roman Catholicism, and especially converts like the Schlegel brothers. It's fucking Schlegel brothers. Presumably, he held the Eastern Church in even lower esteem. Nikki has told me she's a Catholic, so I'm not sure how she squares this with her Hegelianism. Now, obviously, Hegel wasn't an avowed atheist either, but many Hegelians, I'm thinking of Bauer and Feuerbach here, argued that his philosophy had atheistic implications, that theology was just alienated anthropology, etc. Just to lay all my cards on the table, I basically follow Lenin, Lukács, and Adorno when it comes to my interpretation of Hegel. The Hegelian E-Girls would probably think of me as a Frankfurt soy boy. Uh-oh. Lauren Goldner is an important reference for me here as well. Who's that? That's what I want to know. Who that? Who is that? Can you tell me who that is? Do they have a Wikipedia page? I don't think they do. They're like referred to in other things. All right, that'll help us remember. Personally, I regard Herbert Camus's Reason and Revolution as the best intro to Hegel's thought, though Adorno's lectures on dialectics are also good. Lenin's notebooks on Hegel are really intriguing, but don't work well as a point of departure. In terms of recent scholars, Robert Pippin is usually reliable, and my old teacher, Brady Bowman, translated an outstanding text by Eckhart Förster called The 25 Years of Philosophy, covering the arc of philosophical development from 1701 to 1806. Admittedly, I'm not a Hegel scholar and wouldn't call myself an expert by any means. I've not read all of his works. I've read the First System Program and the Differenzschrift, two of his earlier works. Bowman also translated Hegel's Heidelberg writings, including his great essay, Who Thinks Abstractly, so I also read that. Then, of course, I've read the Phenomenology, the Science of Logic, and the Encyclopedia Logic. I've never read the other two encyclopedic entries, his Philosophy of Nature and Philosophy of Mind, or any of his lectures on the history of philosophy or religion. Because I'm interested in art and architecture, I've read parts of the Aesthetics, his lectures on fine art. And of course, I've read the intro to his Philosophy of History, if not all of the history lectures that follow. Lately, I have been spending a lot of time with his Elements of the Philosophy of Right to get a better handle on Hegel's account of the family, civil society, and the state. Okay, so this is all just background for... This person is basically... This is like sacrificial transparency, as I would say. Like, this person is just being upfront. Like, this is what I know about Hegel, the 20th century. Okay, so maybe you have another half hour. So, MAGA communism. So, are the Hegelian E-Girls fascists? In short, no. They're, and I don't think Nikki at least would even object to this appellation, Stalinists. Politically, Nikki seems to align herself with the infrared has faction of MAGA communism. This is where I started looking at that before. Saying that, no. She's called herself Haz's strongest soldier, maybe a joke, who knows, and has posted photos of herself with him and various others from the ACP, that's the American Communist Party, saying that MAGA communists were the most attractive representatives of any political dissident grouping she's encountered. There was a strong ACP presence at the event, incidentally. The two bouncers were both affiliated with Infrared. One of them told me that he used to read this blog and tried to explain his reasons for joining the ACP at length. It was a real IRL notice me senpai moment, but obviously he wasn't reading my blog closely enough if that's where he ended up politically. Again, Anna's a bit more LOL. Again, with the judgment. Anna's a bit more complicated, as she's tweeted in the past about the failure of Stalinism and has speculated that Marxo-fascists like Dugin rep Stalin for his great Russian chauvinism. Wait. Has speculated that that's what's happening. They're repping him for his Russian chauvinism. She described herself as a Bogdanovite, an odd choice for an Hegelian. Bogdanov, after all, was a Machist, a species of neo-Kantianism philosophically far removed from Hegel's system and method. In recent months, it appears that Anna has gone back to read Lenin's materialism and imperial criticism, and has since connected the dots between Bogdanov and French theorists like Deleuze, Lyotard, and Laruelle. Someone more familiar with these thinkers will have to tell me whether she's onto anything there. Nevertheless, Anna said a couple days ago that she's closer to MAGA communism than other tendencies. Maybe MAGA communists are post-fascist Stalinists in the sense theorized by Gaspar Miklos Tamas, but not fascists proper. Let's check in on Anna saying that they are into the MAGA communists. I would like to see this. If there's any meaningful sense in which I'm a crypto-fascist, it's insofar as MAGA communism is somehow essentially fascist, insofar as I'm objectively more aligned with that than any other tendency. Wow. I'd raise objections to both, but I understand the critique. Wait, then any other tendency, like, of all? Like, is situationism a tendency? Like, you like that better than, or is it like of any real existing? Oh my god. But that's, yeah, no, it's, that's pretty bleak. But I mean, what are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? We're gonna have to dive deep into this MAGA commune. I mean, the hard thing with like the right and the left or whatever, it's like you eventually have to talk about these social norms, right? In terms of controlling people and like what are people supposed to be? And then also especially the question of ethnicity and the like, because ethnicity winds up being like a proxy for social trust. So I think one way of breaking down, I don't know, like ethnic or eliminationism, or in a way, you know, like US China is in a way it's ethnic. I mean, ethnic is related to history, right? It's related to where people come from. So anyway, but like you basically have to get into like a bunch of like, you know, people care about genetics and like all this stuff. You have to like get into that because you know, you do have to address those I don't know. Like those are also constituents, like especially in a universalist project. Anyway, maybe I can make it if I keep going. So basically this person's saying they're not fascists proper. But I mean, it's not like we're really making a judgment. Like I don't think this person has really seriously weighed the evidence or anything like that. This person is just basically delivering the news that they don't really consider them fascists. It's like, okay, great, whatever that means. You don't need to be a fascist, this person continues, to have retrograde views about gender, sexuality, and the family, or even entertain anti-Semitic prejudices. Stalinism has a rich history when it comes to all this stuff, and even of cutting deals with fascists. Thermidor in the family, the Doctor's Plot, Molotov, Ribbentrop, etc. The list goes on. But to talk about the ACP, one has to perhaps nuance this a bit. There's a range of different Stalinisms out there, a truth particularly evinced by the fact that the ACP is a breakaway from the old Stalinist party, the CPUSA. For a long time, the MAGA communists who eventually formed the ACP had tried to take over the CPUSA from within, trying to capitalize on the rupture signaled by the 2016 election. But the CPUSA's policy for roughly 70 years was to pressure the Democrats, so realignment didn't pan out and the MAGA communists pulled up stakes. Despite their disavowals, lambasting both Democrats and Republicans, I feel like it's quite likely that they'll just end up adjuncts of the GOP. MAGA communism has had a lot of buzz lately, so I probably don't need to examine it at length. But I will highlight some of the major figures associated with the movement, as well as the fledgling ACP, which launched last month. The big three behind MAGA communism are Hazaldin, Infrahaz, Jackson Hinkle, and Carlos Garrido, Midwestern Marx. Hinkle is a little more than a hype man, a glorified used car salesman, but he's had enough media savvy to get retruthed by Trump on Truth Social. Andy referred to Hinkle as a scumbag anti-Semite, and I tend to trust his judgment. Back in 2017, he was feted in Teen Vogue as one of the 8 young environmentalists working to save the Earth, but he has since denounced ecologism as an anti-human ideology. He's become an outspoken supporter of Putin in Russia, Kim Jong-un in North Korea, and Al Khamenei in Iran. Through his YouTube channel, though his YouTube channel has since been banned, it garnered widespread attention with slickly produced videos. The ACP in general has pretty good production values. They've generated a lot of chatter with well-edited clips featuring their bizarre semiotic mash. I don't know enough about Carlos Garrido to comment, though he appeared on a platypus panel with Sean. Haz is the real brains behind the operation, though, so a few words might be said about him. Haz is actually decently intelligent and has produced dozens of lengthy Twitter posts explaining his philosophical outlook. A number of people, myself included, believe that he used to go by Rafik on RevLeft forums more than 10 years ago. There, he adopted a Bourdieu'ist viewpoint. My suspicions were more or less confirmed by his recent admission in a platypus interview. Before my conversion to Marxism-Leninism, I adopted Bourdieu's view one for one, which was that the phenomenon of Stalin was a romantic bourgeois revolution because it had its basis in the peasants and the petite bourgeoisie. I saw it as an evolution of Jacobinism. Since re-emerging online a few years ago, he went dark for half a decade trying to figure things out after 2016, he's cobbled together a unique political philosophy, though I'm curious how this gels with the Hegelian E-Girls. Despite his avowed Marxism-Leninism, Haz engages extensively with the Russian hyper-nationalist philosopher Alexander Dugin, and believes the Nazi fundamental ontologist Martin Heidegger furnished a new foundation for communism. Specifically, it's in Heidegger's conception of authentic rootedness that Haz finds fertile soil for a renewed workers' movement. He has gone so far as to claim that Marxist theory, quote, Marxist theory in the West is meaningless without the aid of Dugin and Heidegger's thinking, unquote. Moreover, he is extensively distrustful of the Enlightenment and its program of radical skepticism, which obliterates the sense of community and tradition in favor of a sort of cosmopolitan rootlessness. He's a big fan of the art theorist Boris Groys, whose work I love. On top of that, Haz has embraced a kind of accelerationism, not the social democratic reformist sort of Nick Snernick Churchdiek and Alex Williams in Inventing the Future, or Aaron Bastani in Fully Automated Luxury Communism, but rather, quote, accelerating productive forces, according to the Chinese pattern. Anna has criticized Haz in passing for his reliance on Deleuzian cybernetics. I take this to be connected to his accelerationist sympathies. What does she say? Anna says, that's what I'm saying. He, probably Haz, doesn't understand the semiotic order. Kristeva is more Lacanian than Lacan, and determinately negates the abstraction of Lacanian theories, anti-Hegelianism, that Zizek falsely resolves with Schelling and Haz falsely resolves with Deleuzian cybernetics. This is just so funny because it is just like name dropping. It's like, what the fuck are you saying? Like, what the fuck does this even mean? Anyway, doesn't matter. It's fine. I take this to be connected with his accelerationist sympathies. One member of the infrared faction, Grayson, gave a speech at the Hegelian E-Girl Symposium that I might briefly analyze. Okay, so then we have to read that. Fuck. I'm informed there were actually 3 official ACP representatives there: Grayson, Christopher Hilali, and Mirek. It's here, I think. So Grayson, sorry, Dylan. So Grayson's statement: the project of reconciling the highest achievements of human thought with its real conditions of existence is as ancient as thinking itself. Without coming full circle and arriving back at its very place of origin, every system of totality, no matter how complete it may present itself in thought, is in vain. The movement of thought from the conceit of form down to its real scandalous source is a movement of thinking that, though variously sought by this or that thinker, could only ever strive to escape from its imprisonment in the head before being prematurely halted by the prison wardens of philosophy. Some of the first prison wardens, under the guise of seeking gnosis, rejected the imperfect and illusory material world, retreating from it in order to find theosophical unity with the perfected divine source, the pleroma beyond the swirling, inchoate chaos of the outside where materiality and being itself is suspended. Later wardens, like Kant, could only go so far in suspending what presented itself as absolute difference in the antinomies proper to reason itself, gatekeeping, ironically, like a Gnostic demiurge, absolute knowledge from a humanity suspended in the Edenic garnet of thought. Only by bracketing the ontological stakes of this absolute difference and reasserting the guardrails of noumenal policing could form be safely coddled from impairment in its real content. The philosophers today retreat from a world sullied by the vulgarizing hands of the quote-unquote masses, who discourse in memes and attention, whose libidinal economy is more explicit than their own, in order to find an effete comfort in the ideal consistency of form untarnished by its scandalous, quote-unquote, all-too-human origin, in a world unaccountable to it, and which is only a reflection, in which it is only a reflection of. Marx's injunction that philosophers must not merely know, but change the world is turned on its head. reduced to a mantra, inspiring inertia and intellectual conceit. It was Marx's Promethean gesture which first debased philosophy by correlating the Hegelian absolute with the despairing proletariat. That the highest achievements of human thought in the form of German idealism was made manifest in those who work their hands in a merely economic category, those who work with their hands in a merely economic category that was not rationally accountable to the philosophers themselves, is the scandal that the bourgeois philosophers could not forgive Marx for. That the summit of philosophy was revealed to have its fullest revelation in the swing of a hammer and the pouring of concrete was too much for bourgeois philosophy, which bound this Prometheus not to a rock but to the ivory tower, where Marx, too, became condemned to what Lenin called, quote-unquote, the status of a harmless icon, canonized along with the other prophets and saints whose message was also detached from the, quote-unquote, revolutionary soul of human thinking. Where Hegel followed consciousness on its alchemical journey from the abstract to the concrete, Marx locates the concrete as the concentrated expression of totality in the proletariat itself. This is why, for Marx, the proletariat is the ingenuous soil of the people, the material weapon of philosophy, which philosophy arrives at once it has learned how to escape man's head, like a condemned man escaping prison. Here, I would like to celebrate the Hegelian E-Girl podcast as a welcome and bold attempt to break German idealism out of the ivory tower so that it may be exposed to the new age. The rational kernel of philosophy must be rediscovered in this period of transition, and that rediscovery demands bringing Hegel into uncharted territories. The apparent debasement of Hegel is in fact the greatest triumph of Hegelian philosophy, which now opens itself up to a world beyond the stultifying and insular world of the academy. It is only in the rediscovery of Hegel, by means of breaking down those barriers built up around him, that Hegel can once again be stood on his feet. Only then, at the highest point of humanity's alienation in the digital age, can man's essence be returned to him in comprehensible form. With all that said, I'd like to congratulate Nikki and Anna, along with the other hardworking co-organizers who made this event happen, despite the event's attempts to shut it down. Here's to opening a new moment in the self-movement of spirit. LOL. Okay. Grayson's statement is probably the best written of the four and presents a decent narrative, but there are still some criticisms I would like to make. First, Grayson unfairly characterizes Kant as a warden. While he did try to place the Ding an sich, like the noumenal, like beyond the limits of cognition, his efforts to ascertain conditions of possibility were absolutely essential for Hegel and Marx. Since Hegel's appreciation of Kant's transcendental unity of apperception. Hence Hegel's apprehension of Kant's transcendental unity of apperception. And Marx did not identify the proletariat with the absolute. Rather, as I pointed out above, he recognized it as the concrete universal class, a concrete or specific part of society that nevertheless contained within itself all the contradictions of that society, and could thus express the universal interests of that society. The absolute for Marx is the same as that for Hegel. It is freedom, a rationally ordered society. Only the proletariat can bring it about by consciously affirming that which is historically necessary according to the dictates of reason. This is perhaps to get to the most crucial baseline question for the Hegelian E-Girl phenomenon. What is the significance of the current moment for the Hegelian E-Girls? Why is there such historical urgency now? Nikki, after all, ended her statement with, "You cannot stop history itself." It seems that, in agreement with the MAGA communists, they think the time is ripe for the workers to practically seize upon Hegel's theories and complete the system of German idealism. Has and others insist that they don't actually endorse Trump or the GOP, but simply see MAGA as an opportunity to disrupt the present state of affairs, a popular index of discontent with the status quo. But today, the labor movement lies in ruins. When Marx and Engels began settling their accounts with Hegelian philosophy in the 1840s, there was a vital and internationally militant proletarian movement into which they could intervene. Heinrich Heine, the great German poet and Marx's close friend during his stay in Paris, wrote of the need for quote-unquote armed Fichteans to realize the worldly kingdom of ends. Nothing of this sort exists today. Philosophy lives on, as Adorno put it, precisely because the moment to realize it, 1917, was missed. The significance of philosophy, read here Hegel, for Marxism can only be understood by working through the history of Marxism's own failure, as Karl Korsch sought to do in his landmark Marxism and Philosophy essay. This is the task of philosophy at present, to reflect the fact that it should no longer exist and seek the positive conditions of its own anachronism. Ending note. All the memes posted here, most of which are 5 years old, were taken from the Instagram of the one true Hegelian E-Girl, Ansky. Okay. Very cool. Yeah, that person seems cool. So yeah, we finally got through that. Thank you. I think I only have like 10 minutes left because it's like there starts to be quiet hours here. So I mean, I promised talking about more about Ben Zweibelson and Ben Zweibelson and what else? Misanthropocene, right? So I think it's this one. So like Ben Zweibelson, like everything these people are talking about is super heady. So like this is really interesting. Armed Fictians. So basically, like this person is saying there's no movement out there. I would basically say this is where I come in with like absolute exploit. I think I still haven't written the article about that. LOL. But I think basically instead of saying like there's nothing out there, you try to do design so that you capture what is out there. So that what is out there, because people do learn about philosophy. There's even references to stuff in movies and stuff. Like people are cultured. You know what I mean? It's similar to Noam Chomsky talking about how people call into the radio station and they know a lot about football. So it's not like people aren't dumb, right? People can parse categories, and like fundamentally a lot of this, like a lot of what they were both saying in their statements, comes down a lot to like, yeah, again, moving on from like rigid categorizations. And like we all deal with uncertainty in some cases, so we're all familiar with certain cases like where we've changed our mind. But in the conditions of the Hobbesian trap, it'd be funny if I could just jump around. So in the conditions of the Hobbesian trap, right, we can't discover all these connections that we have because we're hiding. We're doing dark forest protocol. So, I mean, dark forest is like, I prefer this. It's also that book, but it's basically like that you're hiding because if people come and get you, if people know where you are, they'll come and get you. And so people talk about this in space, but it's happening right here and right now. I also, I need to make an article about the concept of emotional secret agent. It actually is a nice corollary to entropification. But anyway, like when we keep our feelings a secret, it's basically similar to like, classification and secrecy and stuff like that. Anyway, let me go on, talk about, so like, I really can't recommend this enough. I think in the description, I mentioned the Newtonian fetish. So maybe we can try and find what Newtonian means. So based on like Platonic theory of forms, what else does he have? So what we framed is Cartesian. So this we're searching for clues about what we're going to pick up with this next time. We're going to pick up with Ben Zweibelson on the Newtonian. So like we're just searching for other signifiers it's connected to, right? So we have Cartesian, right? The roots of prominence in the 17th through 19th centuries. So he says it is in this fertile period that war modernized and militaries of the Middle Ages professionalized through significant changes in education, training, organization, theory, and practice. Yet, despite such a change, a surprisingly strong institutional force would preserve many ascientific practices, beliefs, and constructs that continue unimpeded nor seriously examined through today. So, like, he's basically saying, like, we got places to go, but there's a lot of stodgy ideas. Like, it's a very similar idea, but this is obviously it's into accelerationism, at least for me, because for me the takeaway is the status quo is itself revolutionary. There is not really a status quo. I think somebody even mentioned Heraclitus, right? There is no status quo. Like, it's not about supporting what's going on. I also, again, like the constant references to Schmidt as well. I think, again, one of the big uptakes is like we need to be looking for moonshot positive sum possibilities. And I think that, again, that also means part of the loosening, like part of it is like looking for what you want to be there, but we can emphasize the ways in which like things are better off for everybody if we change things around, and that absolutely has everything to do with what they were just talking about in terms of human freedom or whatever, right? And if that's the absolute, right, and actually being able to get along with each other and like have a humane society or whatever, get along, have a nice time, in a way, that's what everybody wants. And so like the key thing is to show each other, but then also to articulate anyway. But I'm just trying to grasp what he's thinking of Newtonian. But Newtonian, Cartesian, even Platonic conceptualism of modern warfare are arguably insufficient. So we could see, I mean, Hegel does not come up, for example, which is interesting. But we're trying to find challenges the Newtonian, physics-based, reverse-engineered, ends-ways means, and collective rationalization of Cartesian geometric logic found in all military doctrine, models, and methods that otherwise dominate how we understand and decisively act in conflicts. Institutional defenders will be ready to chase away such heresy and mobs with pitchforks and flaming torches. So, I mean, the thing with the radical left or radical politics in general is, like, everybody's trying to do this, right? Everybody's trying to analyze. So, like, on the left or whatever, everybody needs to come up with their own new product, which is like the right, like, politics to have. Whereas, like, on the right, it's more like you're competing to see who can rep the thing everybody already thinks they understand, right? Like the right is like, oh, we do America, right? We do, have you ever heard of Men and Women or whatever? The most basic like shit that everybody's fucking heard of, right? Whereas here on the left or whatever this is, like, it's like, oh, but the negation of the negation and, all this, fucking shit. And it's like, okay, whatever. Like, anyway, I mean, this is the same bullshit I do, right? But whatever. But I basically think that's where you break down the left-right distinction. Like, we're going to be able to appreciate everything, but still be excellent to each other, Bill and Ted style. Let's see. But the point here is the overlap where I think the move to try and bring Hegel in is in a way like to move past this Newtonian. Like there's this Newtonian. I don't know who in philosophy you'd associate it. Maybe Immanuel Kant. I don't even know. But like whatever the secret sauce Hegel represents, he's like a psychedelic philosopher. It's like weird shit is happening. Like the movement of history is happening. Like we're part of the movement of history. It's basically a form of diffuse, you'd say, sovereignty associated even with pantheism, right? Because it's like we all have the spirit. So if you have the spirit, you're moving with the spirit, like more power to you, right? Like that's amazing. Like and then we're all part of something anyway. So I can sort of see like the appeal of Hegel, but it also feels like Hegel goes well with general relativity and quantum mechanics. But other people can talk about that in a better way, probably. Only in a Newtonian reality could one effectively break down something such as war into universal enduring principles of war, planning in centers of gravity, or make the broad claim that war has an enduring underlying nature with a contextually fluid character. Okay, so I mean, I refer to this. So Zweibelson would probably not agree with the idea that like war is just fundamentally a contest of wills. So that's interesting. Newtonian style reasoning, as applied by the military professional toward complex warfare, seeks the universal, the general, so that outputs accomplish a timeless quality to cast forward on future unwaged wars a predictive shadow that also spans in reverse, so that every historical battle is also in keeping with the constructs. You can see, I mean, this happens, right, with Marxism, for example. I mean, this is certainly what Baudrillard says about Marxism, which is that it projects its concepts everywhere into the past and future. And like that really forecloses a lot of thinking. And so, I mean, Hegel also has a bunch of whatever, like, I think that's the thing. Like, I'm going to wrap it up with this. This is going to be a provocative statement, but like, what is supposedly one of the things, right, which is like attractive about a young woman or something from the perspective of a so-called man or whatever, is that like this is somebody that you can impregnate, right? Like this, like what you would say, like this is a like I feel creepy for talking about this, but people talk about like this is a person of childbearing age or something who's in good health or whatever, like got all their teeth or whatever. And anyway, like they are fruitful. They can bear your project. Like if you think about procreating as like, you know, they're going to take your genetic material and they're going to help make a new thing out of it. That's awesome. Anyway, so it's making Hegel into something where it's like, this is for you, right? You can come inside basically of Hegelian philosophy and like you can, it will be generative for you, right? This is a welcoming place that not only wants to take you in, but you know, that fucks, right? That wants to fuck you. But like the thing, I think that's a very important thing to parse. It has everything to do with e-girls, where it's like, you know, in a way, the whole thing is the development of new forms of intimacy. But it doesn't necessarily mean that anybody needs to actually have sex, although apparently people do have sex. But like that's in terms of kinetic activity and how we like deal with each other, I don't know. Like I personally think that like where we're going, we have to subject all of our conduct and all of the ways that we like engage with each other to like significant scrutiny. And so we all need to, that's where you look at you know, just to rep one thing right quick. You know, that's where greater jihad comes in. You know, that's where, you know, that's where what is it? Is it One Love Protocol? It's not about actually one love, but like there ain't no hiding place from the Father of creation, and that's like too gendered or whatever. But like, anyway, yeah. So we'll leave this on greater jihad. We'll come back to we'll do a more Zweibelson episode, and then I do need to like tie it in with Grimes. But so yeah, we're basically a Hegelian E-Girls, Ben Zweibelson, Misanthropocene podcast. And the idea, yeah, I just wanted to get through some like Hegelian E-Girl stuff today. And yeah, just keep percolating all my interests together and collating them and leaving these documentary records of my activities. But yeah, inner jihad, a struggle against one's own passions and impulses. Oh, the last thing I'll say is that I adopt this idea of greater jihad, but I don't agree with fighting. I think we basically have met. Like you can talk like the same way you can talk about like metacognition. Like that's something you should probably be familiar with. But there's also meta affect. Affect means emotion. But so this is like thinking about thinking. Ben Zweibelson talks about that. I mean, I don't know if this works, but there's meta affect. Like basically like you can also have feelings about feelings. So I think with greater jihad the question is more that you have like meta feelings. You like say I feel mad about somebody, I want to hit them, but then I have another feeling where I feel ashamed that I want to hit somebody, and so like I go with that feeling, and like there I have this interplay with my feelings where I have to like anyway get along with them. But we're out of time now. It is quiet hours, so I'm going to step back now. And for anybody who actually watches these, again, you have my internal, what do we say? My internal gratitude. Yeah, I always say thank you for helping co-create a world in which I can learn to love love.